Welcome back to another episode of the Value Creation Nation. This is Lane Taylor. Again, I'm here with Scott and Gene, and they just can't get rid of me. I'm getting a peek in behind what these incredible gentlemen do in the world supply chain. And so I'm really excited to have part 2, episode 1. So this is going to be episode 2, but it's really going to be 1B. And I'm excited because we ended with inventory management. So we explored why inventory just isn't simply a supply chain issue. It's really a business strategy issue. We talked about how inventory impacts working capital, profitability, customer service, and ultimately an organization's ability to create measurable value. We also discussed why leading companies don't manage inventory in isolation. They align strategy, demand planning, procurement, operations, finance, you name it, and leadership. They do that to make smarter decisions. So if you have not listened to part 1 yet, I'd encourage you hit pause, go back, listen to it, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Everything is officially live now. Make sure you go and check out part 1, inventory management. Today, we're going to take the next step. We're going to focus on why inventory matters. We're going to dive into how organizations can improve it. Gene and Scott, they're going to share practical strategies for building stronger inventory management processes, reducing excess inventory without sacrificing customer service, improving collaboration across the business, all of the fun stuff. And when it comes to inventory management. So with that, Gene and Scott, welcome back to your show, Value Creation Nation. Let's get into inventory management part 2. Gene, you, before we hit record, obviously are like, you know what? I know where we need to go. I know what we need to talk to, why inventory is such a critical driver of business value. So after part 1 of inventory management, what do you believe is the first thing that we need to hit on part 2?
Yeah, thanks, Lane. We appreciate it. And we believe strongly as we talk with our clients and potential ones and people in the industry, while they usually get the point we make about why inventory is so important, basically the heart of a business, and they tend to agree that it needs to be managed a little bit more broadly as well as deeply, but their struggle with how to go about doing that. And so we thought we'd do this part 2 here, or 1B, as you say, to really give people some tips on how they get their organizations to make the changes necessary to get on top of the inventory issues, which are getting more complex, by the way. We used the term operating model last time, and we'll be talking about that off and on because it's all those aspects of a company that have interest in is happening and have a role in it. And so inventory, as we said last time, and you touched on this, involves not only supply chain and sales and finance and operations, but just about everybody else, because that's what the business lives on, is selling the right products to the right customers at the right prices. So we thought we'd spend this episode on talking about what companies should do to get started in changing, if you will, or transforming even their management of their inventories. And let's start with organization. We see companies have been organizing around traditional matters of the charts of blocks and reports to and so forth. That's not working these days because so much is different in supply chain and business for that matter. So we need to think first about, we always believe that organizations should follow strategy. So as we talked about last time, inventory should follow strategy obviously as well. So if inventory should connect with and align with strategy, obviously the organization needs to. So we usually start with who's in charge of what and what are they doing to get integrated on inventory and to actually balance out what's needed to be done and solve these complicated problems in a management way and an ongoing way. Scott, you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, so once an inventory purchase is made, unfortunately it becomes emotional if a product isn't moving. Right? So the first thing that most organization has to tackle is, what do I do with dead stock? How do I deal with inventory that's not productive? Although I made the emotional decision to buy it, now it sits on my inventory. I believe today, as I did when I purchased it, it has market value. How do I get rid of that product? How do I move it and free the working capital to go invest in a new product that's available? And part of that is an alignment between sales and finance on a systematic program that executes and implements on a regular basis, a periodic basis, that automatically takes a markdown reserve. So you're not necessarily writing off that product each and every month. but you're taking a reserve that says to be able to move stuff that has age to it, I know I'm going to have to discount it. I'm not ready necessarily to do that discounting, but I believe I'll have to discount it based on our historical performance. Come up with a systematic process that enables that to be managed through a write-off count from a financial perspective that ensures that the business begins to write that product off slowly over time and bake that into its profitability statements, so that instead of what happens today where I get to a period where I'm so locked up in dead stock and I have to write it off, or I can't write it off because I don't have the revenue or the margin to take the hit at the end of the year. If you built up this fund slowly over time and it becomes a part of what you're reporting to the street, the funds are there. It's just a matter of physically and systematically, what is it I'm going to use to be able to consume those funds, and then ultimately go and physically destroy or sell off those at a steep discount. And you've got the reserves set up to be able to protect the margins and revenues that you've promised to your shareholders and that you need to deliver to the street. Organizationally, it's about alignment on, again, strategy, right? So what Gene's alluding to is, and we'll get to other roles that need to be put in play, but organizationally, the business has to come aligned on how much profit they need to deliver, how inventory plays strategically in delivering that, and how we create a systematic way to be able to write off things that we've invested in that we have, interest in, but no longer has the market traction that we expected it would have.
What bothers me and always has as being a chief supply chain officer was the inaccuracy that pops up in inventory. With cycle accounting and all the other tools we have out there to be more careful on what we have, we still find many, many companies making errors in what they have. And so this affects labor, it affects shipping, it affects your customers, it affects capital, it affects everything. So it starts with the basics of what do we actually have in inventory of SKU or SKU level, and where is it? This is so important to get the basics right. So management should start with, do we have the basics right before we start talking about the creative things we need to do to make sure it's selling?
So that's the accuracy of the stock ledger, right? So that's what, when you talk to the CFO, if you're going to talk about accuracy of inventory and availability, you're talking about accuracy of the stock ledger. All your systems, your ERP, your replenishment systems, the procurement team, everybody's using the stock ledger as their reference point to be able to determine, based on forecasted demand, how much they need and when they need it, based on the rate of consumption and the rate that products flowing inbound to backfill things that you expect to sell. If you start out where, to Gene's point, your stock ledger is not accurate and you have less than what you think, but the stock ledger is reporting more, of course you're going to underbuy, and you're going to continue to perpetuate a situation where you're never going to be able to have enough stock to keep up with demand, right? And that then causes all kinds of operational issues, comes customer satisfaction issues, and the business gets through a lot of frustration of why they can meet a consumer's demand. Now, part of that is the periodicity at which the stock ledger is populated. We are a strong proponent on a real-time population of the stock ledger, right? So I don't want it to post at night, like once a day, on what I consume that day, because something may come in midday that's trying to consume a part that's already been consumed. And because I'm posting at nighttime and doing a nighttime batch, I think I have it when in fact I really don't, and that causes frustration. So the more the organization can move to all transactions posting real time, so that the business can get a better feel for what they really have, and more importantly, what they don't have, so they can begin to take actions to sway customer demand or to prepare for maybe reducing price on places where they do have deep stock, but the demand isn't naturally there. So you can proactively use it to help consume some of the dead stock we just talked about by recognizing trade-offs the customer may accept if the price is right to make that trade-off. So accuracy of the stock ledger is the grounding point for all of the inventory related processes, and keeping that as real time as possible helps take out all of the things that people have to do to try to adjust real time to respond when they think it's there and it's really not.
Yeah, this question comes up a lot when we get questions about AI in inventory management. I mean, if you don't have the data correct and the accuracy is correct, how are you ever going to get AI to do anything that you're going to believe and get into production? So it's a valuable point that Scott's making about preparing for AI as well, so it can do a lot of things that are not done now, but should be done to get these basics right so that we can get more creative.
So since Gene brought it up, let's just venture into how could AI play in what we're talking about, right? So
I want to say this from an outsider perspective. So from an outsider perspective, in this world that you all consult with and you help businesses with, my presumption is, well, AI is going to solve all these issues. It's going to be perfect. AI is going to be absolutely perfect. Like, guys, there should be no supply chain issues. AI is going to fix all of that. It's going to be, hunky dory. And is that the case? Is that not the case? Maybe that's the path they're going down. But from a consumer, my assumption is there should never be anything out of stock anymore because AI can fix it.
well, let's go slow. AI is not the panacea that everybody wants to portray it is. What AI can do is it can mine your performance and your sales history to give you an indication of the trade-offs that a customer's willing to play given your assortment and actions you could potentially take to try to offer something to a client that they wouldn't naturally buy. So in the example that a customer wants product A, but if you look at other customers and in their basket of goods that they buy, when they buy A, they will buy B as a replacement of A. They're similar enough and they're making that trade-off. You can look at market basket approach to see what consumers are buying when they buy that item to determine how you substitute appropriately. That may be an accommodation that they may be willing to accept because a lot of times there's brand loyalty that they're sticking to. So if you offer something that is of similar caliber, plays a similar function role, so it's the same form and function, all they're doing is they're showing in other behaviors of brand reliance. You may be able to, if the price is right, switch them from that brand reliance to a product that's available that you offer because they need it to be able to complete whatever they're trying to do in the basket. So AI will give you an indication of what is affecting that buyer's behavior and what actions you could potentially take given other customer actions and trying to find trends in how you might provide substitutes. Then you can ferret out, well, what's the price point reduction? What's the offer have to be to encourage the substitution? Because in the end of the day, you want the customer to consume everything that they are intending to consume and more from you, as opposed to buying a partial basket and then going to your competitor and buying the remainder of the basket. So AI can do the data mining to look at what triggered the customer to actually take the substitution, right? What was the discount have to be to basically create an accommodation? What product categories and what was the discounting in that product category that they needed to accept the substitution? But still, it's a behavioral science thing. So what AI is going to do is help uncover the behavioral science part of retail, which impacts inventory, purchasing, how I manage my customer experience, and how I keep that customer engaged with me, as opposed to disengaging, abandoning the cart, and going and dealing with somebody else. That's really what AI is going to give you. It's not going to solve the problem. It's going to give you insight and recommend actions that the business can take, and then learn from that to say, did I reach the goal or did I not reach the goal? And then the company itself has to determine what is an acceptable response. So the guardrail, for example, might say, hey, for them to accept coming off of brand A, they need a 30% discount to go to brand B. The business may say, I don't have enough margin in that product. I'm not willing to give up that much margin. I'm not willing to go to a 30% reduction, but I am willing to go to a 15% reduction. I'm willing to risk the abandonment of the cart because I don't have enough in that full cart to cover the loss in margin they're requiring me to give up. It just gives you the ability to begin to play out those games, set up the guardrails, and determine how you can save a customer, not lose the customer because you're talking about pennies, but also recognize when you can't save the customer and when you have to accept the abandonment because you've set business rules that define to what extent you're willing to respond.
Yeah, AI is coming at inventory from two points of view, I guess. One is sales, and to Scott's point, the behavior of customers to get our forecasts a little bit better. And some are getting some traction in that. Others are finding that that's not as easy as it sounds, but there's some traction in predicting sales closer to the real time. And then, but the other part is is managing your inventory that you have, from the procurement all the way to the dock door. So, and then where it's slotted into the warehouse. So AI doesn't do physical counting unless you got drones out there, looking to see what's where. But we say customers that, oh, we didn't even know we had that. It's sitting over there in the corner. So I think we've got to get operations better, to our point, before AI is really going to hit the mark better. And where can it go? We don't know for sure yet. There's some experiments, a lot more experiments going on than actual reality.
All right, so let's step back again because we covered in the first episode, we talked about there are 4 key parameters that you need to manage inventory. There's lead time variability, which is the inbound side. Lead time is the point I place the PO till the time it's received in my warehouse and available for stock to sell to a customer. That's lead time. And how accurate is the vendor at delivering to their published lead time, and how much variability is in that window that I'm using. Okay, so that's the inbound side of procurement. The other is demand and demand variability. So how accurate am I at predicting how much I'm going to sell, and how much variability is around that point prediction of how much I'm going to sell, and how does that change from a seasonality perspective? Those 4 parameters in harmony help you define how much inventory you're going to carry, where you're going to carry it, and the extent to which you need to buffer for the variability called safety stock to ensure that you hit a service level that you want to define as your in-stock position, right? Let's not overcomplicate it by all these other things that can be done organizationally. Those are the 4 things that need to be managed. And as the foundation of those 4 things, what Gene has brought up in the beginning of the conversation is the stock ledger is the starting point for the evaluation and the computation of how much inventory I need compared to the demand and the lead time and when I need to actually place the next order.
Let's get one more point out on this one, because Scott's absolutely right, and that's the way companies should look at it. Let's talk about change for a minute, because what happens is when we see companies embracing everything we're saying and realizing the problems, they've figured, well, let's get some change going on here. So they have a meeting with the right people, and they talk about how can we improve our inventory management. Time and time again, they'll use the traditional way of doing change management, meet somewhere, talk about it, come to some consensus, and thank everybody for joining a 4-hour meeting and going back and doing the same old thing over and over again. So I think we need to think about change when we talk about inventory management. Some companies are saying, how do I get AI ready and have our organization ready for it? And there's nothing wrong with that, except you've got to do a little bit more than that when you're trying to get your arms around the full inventory management issue. And Scott's raised it up so well. And so how do we get change to happen that's focused on today's realities and get people to work better together on value, and not some old KPIs that were put in place 10 years ago about some inventory things, and really get focused on the right KPIs and go forward that way. So don't forget about change management when you do take on inventory management.
Yeah, so let's talk about change management for a second, just as a concept. And we'll have a podcast where we talk about change management in isolation, because we at eMay Consulting have put together a strategy for how an organization gets together to provide clarity and focus and alignment on what not only the strategy is, but create alignment on what the go forward approaches will be and how you'll get there. What you're really trying to do is you want the voices of the organization to collaborate, to raise their concerns and have those concerns heard, and create a program and a process where the business talks to each other rather than being dictated to and being told what they're going to do. Nobody likes to be told what to do, right? Everybody wants their voice to be heard. Everybody will buy in when they believe that whatever the go forward direction is what they have helped to create. So inventory is no different than any other problem the business will take on, because inventory is impacted by so many areas of the business. Getting the collective mind and the collective alignment is probably, as you look organizationally, inventory is one of the biggest issues that requires this cross facilitation, dialogue, and alignment to ensure that it's managed appropriately. So the point Gene's trying to bring up, I believe, with raising it as change management is the team, unless everybody is heard and the end solution aligns with all perspectives and the team buys in that this is the go forward way to solve it, then if they don't align to that, then they're going to go back and do what they want to do and live in their silo and say, you guys do what you want, but this works for me and I'm going to keep doing what I want. You can do whatever you want, but everything I'm doing works, right? And the problem becomes typically organizationally that issues in a process happen between the connection points of silos. So the way you break down the silos is think of one connected process and you determine where those handoffs appropriately happen. And typically that happens systemically versus someone just saying, well, I'm done with my part. I'll throw it over the fence. I don't need it. The next person needs it down the line. I'll let them worry about getting that information. When they have the opportunity to collect it and it's easy for them, it's available. They just don't do it because they don't need it, and therefore they'll let their partner do it. So getting alignment of vision is critical, particularly in inventory, because inventory is that one process that connects so many different parts of the organization together, which leads to where Gene started the conversation about organization. Who owns inventory in the organization, right? That's always the challenge, is who is the owner? Okay, now there are a lot of different perspectives of who is the owner. It could be the person who hits the buy button, right? Your procurement team could be the owner of inventory. That's one place, because in the end of the day, they are the ones that are actually putting the money on the table, and they could be empowered to do the interrogation. They have to be convinced that it's the right decision before they hit the buy button. So that's one potential owner. Another potential owner could be the chief supply chain officer, who says, okay, I own the end-to-end process. I'm empowered to own the use of working capital. And so therefore, I'm going to partner with everybody to make sure that when we organizationally align and say yes, that I am going to be the executive in charge, and I'm going to make the determination that, yes, this is the right thing for the business. So that could be the owner. A third owner could potentially be the CFO, who says, I own working capital, I own finances, I own delivering to the street, I own making sure we hit our revenue margin targets, and I'm not going to accept or allow anything to be bought or sold or changes in pricing unless I understand the financial ramification and I give the approval to do so. The determination of who in any of those three, and there are numerous others that could be owners in the process, the determination of who ultimately becomes the owner really boils down in my mind to a couple key parameters. One is who has the organizational acceptance and moxie to be able to stand up to the C-suite as well as to your vendors and basically carry that ownership. That's one. Two, who has the ability to create this facilitated discussion across the business to align all parties and make sure that actions we are taking are accepted, agreed to, and that everybody signs up and says we will deliver the end goal that we deliver. We talked about S&OP. S&OP last time is nothing but a collaborative process that aligns different areas of the business. So who organizationally has the ability and the political moxie in the business to be able to hold people accountable and deliver on whatever the agreement is, and hold people accountable to be able to deliver on their part? And then three, who's got the charisma to be able to carry the process? Because it requires someone who can work across teams and get them to do tough things even though they don't want to do it, and have confidence by the C-suite and your shareholders and your equity companies that may be investing in the business, that they trust the person that's managing all this, that they're doing it in the best faith of the business and they're not doing it to protect their own world. So it's really about who can carry those parameters as opposed to what the title of the person is in the business.
We just an anecdote on this. In having hundreds of these conversations, we once decided the owner is the CEO. He owns inventory because he's the only one that has everything reporting to him. And that's impractical, obviously, because typically he would say, well, it's the shareholders. So you have to drill down to Scott's point about who owns it step by step. And supply chain has been nominated, and usually we find in charge of at least orchestrating everybody's interests here into a production plan and a sales plan, to Scott's point. But it's just interesting that if you start looking for the owner of inventory, you can't end anywhere except the top. It is a business issue, must be resolved by people with business approaches to it, and using all these tools just is helping them make the right calls. But it's a complicated subject and needs to be taken on. Now, those that have solved it, like Walmart and P&G and others, have done a really good job of getting everybody talking to each other and understanding what each other's role is. It's to Scott's point, where so that you can have someone orchestrating it, but in fact, everybody owns it.
And what I love about these conversations is coming from a business standpoint and coming from a consumer standpoint. I'm a lot more on the sales and marketing side. And in a previous life, I may have said it on another episode, I was in a large large organization or corporate organization. They were a Fortune 5 company at the time. And, as someone on the sales and marketing side, if I was trying to get something to a client and we didn't have it, my thing was, why don't we have this? I just I need to make a sale. Like what, and then people would say, well, sales and marketing and supply chain, they just don't talk. And I think that's the one thing that as I get to know both of you, and I know that in the business world of it's so really important. And so the supply chain is such a vital part of a business. And correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes it's an afterthought. I mean, is that a fair statement and a fair assumption?
The supply chain organization has been wanting to be at the table, which is at the board level for years, right? That they want to be able to share the issues and the concerns they have. But to get that respect, they have to be prepared to demonstrate how they're going to create value through the supply chain. That's the part that supply chains have missed the mark on, right? So that's why we came up with Value Creation Nation, is because the idea that every part of the business should be looking at how they generate value for the business, including the supply chain. So historically, supply chains have been about cost containment, right? How I get the lowest cost per unit delivered, how I get the lowest, price for pick. How do I manage my costs in the four walls? How do we get it through the warehouse as quickly as possible? So cycle time through the facility and order cycle time. The problem is that's great, but does that really add value to the business? Well, yeah, it does, because it reduces costs, but the consumer doesn't necessarily see that. It may, in that we can keep our costs, our prices to the customer down, but that's not helping grow the business. That's just helping to manage the current margins that are being delivered. What we're proposing is that inventory is the element that chief supply chain officers or whoever is dubbed as the owner should be at the board level, helping to determine how inventory becomes a competitive weapon and how we use our working capital to be able to add value to the business, not just manage sort of to a profitability goal. And next session, we're going to talk about in the next podcast, we're going to get into a balanced scorecard, right? Instead of just talking about, as Gene just referenced, historic KPIs that most businesses have run in, which is, cost per unit, productivity per hour for different functions, those sort of things. We're going to talk about a balanced scorecard that says, let's put this as a collective to say, is it adding value or is it not, right? Okay, cost per unit, does that add value to me or does it not, right? What does it really mean? So we're going to talk about a balanced scorecard in the next session. And what we're pushing the point on is inventory is the lever. If you choose as a chief supply chain officer to use it, to own it, that they should use that to be at the board level to demonstrate how inventory now becomes a competitive weapon, not just a necessary evil to manage the business. Kind of like what you just talked to, Lane, which is, hey, I need it. Hey, I can always overproduce. I mean, the answer for the supply chain team, if I always have to be in stock, is I overproduce and I have way more inventory than I need. Okay, great. You always are in stock, but if I don't have I'm basically investing in that, so I'm now tied up working capital. Is that really what you want to do? And the answer, of course, of that is no. And if you're a manufacturer, you've got raw materials now that I could use to produce the hot things, but I've tied them up with things that may not be so hot because the sales guy said I need it for a specific order. There are trade-offs that a business is always making. The question becomes, what plan are you running? What's your strategy? Why am I doing it or not doing it? And how do I use inventory as that strategic weapon?
When it comes to inventory management, now we have spent a couple of sessions on this. What would you say to the individual that's listening to this right now that is the most important thing they need to realize to add value to the organization?
To me, it's about, we've touched on this, how that fits in the operating model, which has the job of taking the strategy of the company and making sure it's achieved in execution. So inventory is one of the key areas in that operating model that a lot of people are infected with it and affect it. If they can get together, do some of the things we've talked about here, and get an organization or model that lets them have that value agenda, then that's the most important thing that companies can do to increase the value of their business.
I'm going to give a little different perspective. So what is value for an organization and how is value created? To me, that's from the customer's eyes. So I would, if you were asking me where I'd start, I would look at, do a voice of the customer perspective, try to understand what your customers are valuing, and then look at that, overlay that to your assortment to determine where you may be over assorted, right? Or where you may be under assorted, as well as doing a market assessment at your competitors to understand where you position and where you may be over or under sorted. So you can do an assortment assessment to prune your assortment to get to what's really needed to be competitive in the marketplace. Once you have that as a grounding, then you can overlay, well, what is the service level that we need to deliver on the products we're going to sell to our customers or our consumers? Then you can take that and bring it back to say, well, what does my inventory strategy need to be for the products that my customers and consumers value, and the in-stock that I have to deliver, to determine what my inventory strategy needs to be able to deliver on that expectation. In the end of the day, you grow and expand by adding value and delivering value to your customers, right? You don't grow by pruning and streamlining internal costs. That's not how you're going to grow. By stretching and reaching new customers and delivering to those customers that you have and adding value to your customer base. That's how you're going to grow. So I would propose that the business do less internal challenging and more external review to understand what the market values, to reposition themselves to deliver on that value proposition from the customer, which will help them reposition themselves internally in organization to deliver on that value proposition.
Yeah, I think both my answer and Scott's go together, because if you believe you create value by via your customers, which you should, then you're creating value from internal work that makes it, you're able to deliver that. If on time in full is your goal for fulfilling orders, that's creating value right there. Because unless your competitors are beating you on that, you're winning. So I think it's, again, what is valuable to your business and how do you define that? Make that your go-to issue and get an agenda around it. That's perfectly right on.
Yeah, a lot of times what I see is processes were put in place because of a corner case scenario they ran into where a customer was upset, and then that process remains forever, right? Everybody always remembers when I was out of stock on something and how I needed to respond, and so therefore I'm never going to have that happen again. And so I create a process that ensures that never happens again, particularly with a key customer. If you step back and you break that sort of historical view of what happened and really challenge what adds value, and you relook at how you're doing things and why you're doing things, you'll get an unlock of all these processes and things that you put in place because of your historic bias that are no longer needed, particularly if you have new systems. So the challenge will be, we haven't talked about technology and the enablement of technology and the value that technology can bring to a business. Most folks don't take it as advantage of the technology as they could because they have other sub-processes, legacy sub-processes they created that are filling those voids. If they translated that into their technology, the technology could carry the ball and it would free up people to do other things. People don't look at it that way. They've got their processes, they work, and they don't step back and say, well, why am I doing it? Is this adding any value to anybody? Can I stop doing it? Or can a system pick it up and do it for me where I don't need a person to do it anymore, right? That's why I think if you can get the team, we talked a second ago about change management. Now we're talking about how you add value. Put the two concepts together. If I get the business talking about what they believe that adds value to the customer and your end consumer, and you put that together with all the work they're doing, now they become an owner of changing what they're doing to be more efficient. And now they accept that they're going to let some things go. That's change management, right? They're accepting they're going to do it a different way. That's change management. And then now you get a new operating model, which is leaner and more efficient, change management, that helps you deliver more with the business with less people, and you add value to the business by doing it.
I love what you said there just a minute ago of, can you look at, and I'm thinking as you said it, of like, what is in our SOP and what is in our documents that were built off of a mistake or somewhere that this procedure was built off of this. And so that's a very, very good perspective. So with that being said, obviously, Gene and Scott, if you're listening to this show right now, eMay Consulting, Scott alluded to it. These two fine gentlemen, that's what they do on a daily basis. This is what they do in their daily life. And so a plug for them, if you've ever wanted to get to work with Gene and Scott. Gene and Scott, what is the best way to reach them? Can they go to their website? What do you suggest? We can put their LinkedIn profiles, obviously, in the show notes. What's the best way to get in contact if someone is sitting there saying, you know what, I need to talk to them about inventory management? Where would that be?
LinkedIn's a good way. Email's a good way. Calling us is a good way. If you go to our website at emayconsulting.com, you can get our contact information. We love dialogue. If people listening have a topic that they want to hear us discuss, please send us an email, call us. We're open to the dialogue. We love to bring up topics that people are struggling with, and we'll have the discussion here to handle it. So don't wait for us to bring it up. If you have something that you're dealing with that you want us to tackle, please let us know, and we'll bring it up in a podcast and have a conversation like this about it.
Yeah, incredible. Well, guys, before you head out of here, do not hit the X button yet. I'm going to ask you again, do it a favor. If you could go to Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, give the gentleman a 5-star rating and a 5-star review. That really helps and boost up the algorithm. All you got to do is, if you're on your phone, scroll on Apple, scroll all the way down to the bottom. You get 5-star rating, 5-star review. It is that simple. So make sure to do that. And then again, if you guys have any questions or comments or anything that you want to talk about on future episodes, go over on LinkedIn and make sure, and I will put that in the show notes as well. Our team will put that there so you can click directly and go get connected with them. So until next time, Value Creation Nation, thanks so much for listening to today's episode, and we'll see you again on another episode.